Pete, we'll start, if we can, of course, with the fantastic news that two of your second-year scholars have been offered professional terms for the new season, Tom Chamberlain and Grant Horton. From your perspective, that must be exactly what you're hoping to see.
Yeah, it's excellent news for the academy as a whole. Obviously great news for the two young men. They've worked extremely hard. But I think it shows real good progression within the club that lads are taken on and given the opportunity. Obviously Grant then made his debut in the Football League. Chamber made his debut in the Checker trade, so it shows that if players are good enough, then they'll be given that opportunity, and that's been a clear message to us as staff from the outset, that if players are good enough, they'll be given that opportunity, and then ultimately it's down to them. So credit to those two lads. They took their opportunities, whether that be when they're out on loan or when they're around the first team. But yeah, it's great for the academy to show continued progression and pathway throughout the age groups.
Overall, throughout the 2019-20 season, there were 6 under-18s players involved in the first team match team squad. I think 4 of them got on the pitch and were able to make an impact. That must be, again, another huge positive to see the players that you work with day to day getting the opportunity alongside the likes of your Luke Varneys and Ben Tozers. Yeah,
very much so. I think the link between first team and the 18s academy is very strong. The lads get a lot of opportunities to train with the first team, and that ultimately is then the first test. And how do they deal with that environment? The pros have been great with all of the young lads throughout the whole year, and the manager, director of football, Russ, this manager, have all said that if their lads are good enough, they will get their chance. So to have those opportunities and exposure for them is great. Even just travelling with the first team gets them in and around the environment and the culture and the professionalism that's needed to succeed as a professional footballer. And credit to them when they've had their opportunities, they've taken them. And we're delighted that they're getting that opportunity, but ultimately it's down to the player, and we need to make sure they're good enough to cope with those demands.
Archie Brennan, of course, was a first-year professional for the 1920 season. He also made his first-team debut in the Leeson.com trophy. Unfortunately, Archie's going to be no longer with us after a long sort of spell of service with the club. A fantastic experience for him being a professional footballer for a year. How hard is it for young players to bridge that gap in terms of going from under-18s to first team? Because, of course, the jump is significant, and sometimes, maybe if it's financial or other reasons, there isn't quite the time given to them maybe that could be. You know, how hard is it to try and achieve that?
Ultimately, I think one of the hard things to do is to get signed by an academy at a young age group. Then the next hardest thing is to achieve your scholarship, and then the hardest thing is to get the professional contract, and then the hardest thing on top of that is to sustain it. And Archie, was with us since the age of 9. Was a brilliant lad around the training ground, sort of embodied all of the values and beliefs of the club, and he performed very well on loan as an under-18. To then go and sustain as a pro is very hard, especially when a one-year opportunity is really hard to make sure that you can nail your place within the squad and within the team. We're very keen to expose lads as young as we can to men's football and loan football. Strategy we brought in sort of 2-3 years ago with loan programme and having partner clubs, and we've been very fortunate to get those lads opportunities, and ultimately the lads have got to prove that they're good enough and able to do that, and then it's to make sure that they get those loan opportunities within that first year, and ultimately then it's down to the player to do well in that opportunities that they get, to ensure they get their extension of the contract. But it's a very hard time. It's probably the hardest point of a career, I'd suggest, where you're in the transition from academy to first team. George Lloyd's still managing to push on year after year, and that's a great example of it can be done, but also it is very hard to sustain that.
We had a great night here, didn't we, in the FA Youth Cup? Well, a few great nights, but one particularly maybe when you took on Arsenal, obviously a very famed academy set up for many years in English football, and took him all the way to penalty kicks and arguably could have won it in normal time, let alone in extra time. What a great night that must have been, even though you didn't come out on the right side of the result.
Yeah, for sure. We said to the lads that they represented themselves brilliantly, they represented the club superbly, and that's first and foremost the most important thing. I think it's proof to us as staff that the model that we're going after, where we have sort of development games, using the under-18s youth team as an opportunity to push younger players and give them exposure, as well as then getting lads exposure at high-level men's football, step 3, step 4, step 5. When they then get their opportunity to be tested on a performance night, which that was, they did extremely well. Played some very good stuff. Ultimately, it's the luck of the penalties that it comes down to, and credit to Arsenal, they kept their composure and were better in that state. But it's a learning curve for us as staff, how we prepare players even more for those competitive competitions. We're getting a lot of age groups competing really well in their cup competitions, so how do we make sure that they're mentally ready to deal with the demands of performing under pressure? And that can only be good long term as we try and bridge that gap between 18s and first team, and make sure that players can. We know they're technically and tactically good enough, but can they also mentally perform under the pressures? But it was a great night, great representation of the club, and credit to all those lads from 15-year-olds involved to the 18s who were involved. It was a great performance. Yeah,
you mentioned there that some 15-year-olds were involved. It looks like we've got a very promising under-16 group that are coming through, and many of them are going to be involved as scholars over the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think what's most pleased from the outset is that 9 have come from sort of internal. That's credit to all staff that have been involved with them, but also again proof that we're giving local young players an opportunity, and ultimately if they're good enough they will get that opportunity, and that's really important for sustainability in the long term as we strive to produce more players for the first team. Sort of 4 or 5 of them have been with us since the age of under-8s, under-9s. I remember them, they were my first age group actually as a under-9s group, so it'll be really nice to work with them full time next year. And then as we've added to the age group over the years, to then have an external come in sort of later on in the programme but deal with the demands of 18s football, I think it's great. All 9 of the 10 have played over 5 youth team games this year. 3 of them started the FA Youth Cup against Arsenal. That's only really possible with our loans pathway, where we're giving the second years the opportunity and some first years to get exposure to men's football, and then it's the test of the players and all the staff to make sure that the players coming up and through are ready to deal with the demands of the next level up, and hopefully that will keep the progression and the reel of players coming through for the first team in years to come.
You pack so much into an under-18 season, don't you? Let alone even the fact that this one was cut short, of course, because of the coronavirus. But if you were to look back over the course of this 2019-20 under-18 season, what are some of the sort of milestones and sort of great points you'd pick out of being great memories from the season?
There are a lot to go with, like you say. I think the easiest way to do it is on the pitch and off the pitch. Very much with our apprenticeship, we don't necessarily, it's an apprenticeship in being a professional footballer. It's an apprenticeship in developing as a young man and alongside a footballing career, whether that be then to go non-league professional, university, abroad, and the diverse range of opportunities that the players have got, I think, was a real highlight this year. Work experience opportunities at Superdry, charity work, doing World Book Day, all of those sort of enhanced them as young men, but most pleasing and the milestone of that was how well all of them were able to deal with the situations, represent themselves with such confidence, and really represent themselves in the club superbly. So that was a massive milestone. Also in terms of the second years, all completing all their education on time to really good grades. It's sometimes very hard to come out of school as a year 11 and go into full-time work, which the scholarship is, but to then balance your education as well. So I think that was a real milestone for us as a club in the way that all staff supported them. And then on the pitch, the main milestones, I think the things that we've covered, obviously the FA Youth Cup run, young men going out on loan to their various clubs and performing and doing well, the FA Youth Cup, and the debuts. I think all of that as a whole are really good milestones, but those players have all set a standard for themselves that they have to keep to, because there's now going to be even more expectation on them. So it's really important that we as staff keep trying to prepare them as best we can, and players need to embrace the challenge next year when it all comes back to normal.